from large cities and small towns from across this state, and you represent the rich diversity of its 12 million citizens. Illinois stretches from Winthrop Harbor, which is further north than Cape Cod, to Fort Defiance Park, which is further south than Richmond, Virginia. It is a rich and good land, and an ancient one. Glaciers moved across this state in prehistoric times. Tribes of Indians lived here as early as 8000 BC. Settlers arrived after the War of 1812, and on December 3rd, 1818, it became the nation's 21st state and was called Illinois, the French version of Indian words meaning superior men, a particularly felicitous term, entirely appropriate to this audience tonight. Over the years, our state has given rise to many new ideas and programs, not the least of which is the program which you now begin, founded in Illinois 76 years ago by 3 members of the American Legion of Illinois, a policeman named Matt Murphy, a lawyer named Hayes Kennedy, and a school teacher named Harold Card, who shared the conviction that government could best be learned by doing, and who believed that although America was not perfect, it was perfectible. It was an idea whose time had come, and there are now boy states and girl states in every state of the Union. Nationwide, over 1 million young men have participated in this program since it was founded 76 years ago. 25,000 more will do so this summer as citizens of Boy State encampments just like this one across the nation. In a few days, some of you will be aldermen or mayors or sheriffs. By the end of the week, others of you will have the title of senator or attorney general or governor. But all of you are citizens by virtue of the oath of citizenship you took a few moments ago. Being a citizen of Boy State is not a temporary responsibility, one that might end at noon on Friday. You will never be a former citizen of Boy State. Once a citizen, always a citizen. And your sworn duty to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States does not end when you get back on the bus on Friday morning. Because Boy State citizenship is a permanent commitment, there are a lot of Boy State citizens out there in the world. The names of some of those Boy Staters from earlier years will be familiar to you. Names like Dick Cheney, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Harry Reid, Joe Lieberman. Men who have assumed positions of leadership in the life of our nation. There are many other Boy State citizens, however, whose names you will never know, who prove that Boy State has a profound effect on the day-to-day lives of ordinary people, who serve on school boards and church councils and civic committees, who are an influence for good in our lives and in the life of our communities, who help build a more perfect union. William Jefferson Blythe IV was just such a person. Despite the Roman numerals behind his name, his life was far from pretentious. He was born in a small town. His father died in an automobile accident 4 months before he was born. Having very little money, his mother went to nursing home, and the young boy was sent to live with his grandparents, who ran a grocery store in the poor part of town. His stepfather was an alcoholic who was often abusive to the family. These days, we'd call him a child at risk. But he did well in high school. He played saxophone in the marching band. He was elected to the National Honor Society. And every Sunday, he put on his good suit and his clean shirt and walked up the street to the Baptist church, carrying his Bible. Just before his senior year, he was selected to attend Boys State, having some of the same doubts about himself and his future that some of you have about your lives. And while at Boys State, he was chosen to attend Boys Nation, just as two of you will be. And while there, he had his picture taken in the Rose Garden of the White House with the President of the United States. A picture which, if you've ever seen it, you'll never forget. President Kennedy reaching out to shake hands with a young man, his face shining with sort of a transforming joy. Of course, by then he wasn't William Blythe anymore. By then he had taken his stepfather's family name and was known as Bill Clinton. We sometimes tend to glamorize our leaders, to imagine that they have advantages that we don't have, that they're immune from the problems which we face. And then someone comes along like Bill Clinton. As a teenager, he had problems at home, just like some of you. He was not always able to resist temptation, just like some of you. He was capable of making mistakes, just like some of you. He was capable of stretching the truth, just like some of you. He sometimes hit on young ladies who seemed more attractive the night before than they did the morning after. Alas, just like some of you. But he kept trying, day after day, never giving up, because he believed his mother when she told him, just as you believed yours when she told you that he might grow up to become president someday. Boys State made a difference in his life. He devotes 9 pages of his autobiography to his Boys State experience. And Boys State will make a difference in the lives of many of you as well. For many of you, the friends you make here will last a lifetime. The lessons you learn here will change your lives, just as it has for so many others, in so many ways, over so many years. And that is part of the legacy which you inherit tonight, as part of a long line of Boys State citizens, 1 million strong, stretching back over 76 years. For you, however, Boys State comes at an unusual time in the history of our republic. The challenges are different, and in many fundamental ways, your generation is different from those who have gone before you. You have experienced the biggest meltdown of the world's financial system since the Great Depression. You will inherit a $15 trillion national debt, a government which borrows 40 cents of every dollar it spends, an economy kept alive by massive loans from the central banks of China and Japan, loans to the United States which consume 80% of the world's savings. You will also inherit a bitterly divided government, blue states and red states, mean-spirited public discourse, and political campaigns that are mean and dirty and enormously expensive. You will find yourselves living in a world more dangerous than the one you were born into, and many of the big problems are going to come due on your watch. For your generation, the world will truly be a global village, and some of our neighbors aren't doing too well. Half of the world's people live on less than $2 a day. 1 billion people will go to bed hungry tonight. 1 billion people won't get a glass of clean water today, nor any other day of their life. By the time your generation takes over, the easy choices will already have been made. Only the hard choices will remain. And yet the opportunity will be there too. The opportunity to make a difference. Some call you the millennials. You differ from Generation X in that you are neither cynical nor alienated, and you seem to actually like your parents. You're not like the baby boomers, who are ideologues and tend to listen only to those who share their ideology. You are seen as being inclusive when it comes to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. You have positive attitudes on the ability of government to play a constructive role in our lives. You are inclined to build coalitions. You are networked. You text and you tweet and you Twitter. You talk to each other. You listen to each other. You are problem solvers. You already realize that we don't have to agree on all things to agree on the important things. And most of all, you are pragmatic. You are beginning to understand how fragile our planet is, how painful the future may be, a future of limitations and difficult decisions, what John Kenneth Galbraith called the age of uncertainty. As proud Americans, you know that ours is the greatest nation in the history of the world, the richest, most powerful, the most envied, the most consequential. And yet, as a pragmatic generation, you also know that our nation leads the industrialized world in the rates of murder, violent crime, imprisonment, and divorce. 3% of the residents of Washington, D.C. are infected with HIV, an increase of 22% in 1 year, rates higher than West Africa. Almost as many people have been murdered so far this year on the streets of Chicago than soldiers have died in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. As a pragmatic generation, you know that our overwhelming military supremacy is no cure for the challenges here at home, sometimes very close to home, sometimes very close to your lives. Nearly 1/3 of American high school students will not graduate. 1 million drop out every year. 1 student every 26 seconds. One of the highest dropout rates in the industrial world. As the pragmatic generation, you are also becoming sensitive to the importance of diversity in America. Learning to celebrate diversity, not just tolerate it. Learning that America is as much a mosaic as it is a melting pot. A complex mosaic in which people can join together in a common cause without having to surrender their individual identity. Celebrating our diversity, respecting our differences, gathering together around shared values, learning to protect the rights of people different from ourselves, knowing that the rights of all of us are diminished if the rights of any of us are threatened. Celebrating the election for the presidency of a man from Illinois, who by virtue of his race could have been legally owned by 16 of his predecessors. An unusual time, unusual challenges, facing a pragmatic generation, an uncertain future, in a time of crisis for our nation and its people. And you could not have picked a better time to come to Boise State, because the mission of our program is perhaps more relevant to your generation than ever before in our 76-year history. There is a mysterious cycle in human events, President Roosevelt declared. To some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. This generation of Americans, he said, has a rendezvous with destiny. Whether you like it or not, I very much suspect that your generation will have its own rendezvous with destiny. Racism and sexism and intolerance can be overcome during your generation. Our cities can be rebuilt, our crumbling schools repaired, a decent environment restored during your generation. And integrity can be brought back to the halls of government during your generation. Illinois has elected 6 governors during the past 50 years. 3 of them have gone to jail, and we will soon know whether another of them will join them. And yet this is also a state that has produced senators like Everett Dirksen and Paul Simon, governors like Adlai Stevenson, presidents like Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, and Abraham Lincoln. Whether we become the land of Blagojevich or the land of Lincoln will be for your generation to decide. Right here in Illinois, right here on Mr. Lincoln's prairie. Listen closely. Can you hear his voice? It is for us, the living, to be dedicated to the unfinished work, he said. Listen closely. Can you hear his words? With malice toward none and charity to all, he said. Touched, he said, as surely we will be, by the better angels of our nature. The color guard will advance to retire the colors of our country. You will stand at attention.